Hello and welcome. I'm Ron Peters and this is my multimedia production studio, Mystic Frequencies. Our video today is a full studio tour. So let's not waste any time and get right into all the synthesizers, keyboards, and everything else we have going on around here. Okay, we're going to jump right into the keyboards. This is the Quasimidi Sirius, the quintessential synthesizer of 90s techno, house, and dance music. Give you a quick little taste of it. Pretty amazing keyboard. Down here is the Morodernova. Only 500 of these were made, and they all featured Giorgio Moroder's, what do you call that, caricature? They even put it on the sides, which is interestingly fun. Collectors, 500 made. All the sounds in it are the classic, famous Giorgio Moroder sounds. And here's the Mono Poly, which is 4 oscillators, obviously well known. This is the Teisco S60p. This was a little preset synth they made, somewhat scarce. Presets only. But man, does it have some screaming bass and lead sounds. No knobs to turn, just poke a button and play away. What a cool keyboard that is. Unfortunately, I don't have it connected right now, but I will make a demo sometime of it. The Teisco S60f, single oscillator synthesizer with a great LFO section. This little beast looks very simple, but it can make some awesome sounds. It's amazingly well laid out. It's the baby brother to this, which is the S110f. This is 2 oscillators, duophonic, has a filter bank with parametric settings. I guess you'd call that a resonant filter bank. That is awesome. You can have direct output, you can mix it with it, or you can go straight through the filter bank. Love that keyboard. Oberheim Matrix 6, which is basically almost as capable as a Matrix 12 or an expander. However, it's all flat panel, hard to program, even though it has a lot of patching ability. Thus, the controller here, which gives you a knob for everything, which is nice because you can literally make sounds easily now with it. And here's the Akai AX-60. This was part of Akai's micro studio system, which included the S612 sampler and several other MIDI units. The MG1212 12-track recorder was the big daddy of the system. That is a single oscillator, I do believe, synthesizer. Moving along, this is the Chromatic Music Lab's Wholetone Revolution. This was made only in Japan. It features a Janko key bed that, just with 3 or 4 fingers, see if you can see this, you can play some huge chords with this. Don't have it hooked up right now, but you get 88 keys in that space of 61. And here's DX9, DX7 below it, and DX5 below it. Don't need to explain how great the DX line of synths were for a long time. They're still used today. the Kawai K5, which was Kawai's second synthesizer based on harmonic programming, and their first all-digital. The K3 was their first based on harmonic programming, but it was still analog on the filters and all that. The K5 is all digital, in and out, all the way through. The K5 you can program 128 harmonics compared to the K3 at 32. The K5000 came out later with a whopping 512 harmonics you can program. So that puts the K5000 at half of what the Kinetic Sound System's Prism synth could do. But that's so rare. Yeah. So here we have the Korg Triton Extreme 88. I have to get way back to get that in the shot. This featured a vacuum tube, which was their idea to warm up the sound a little bit, and it does help a little. Not as much as they claim, but it does help. Full workstation. This one I've installed the MOS board, which opens up the F bank of sounds, which is all synthesized instead of sampled. I do believe it's their early synthesizer analog modeling. You'd have to look that up online to see more detail. But that's a great setup. Kawai M8000, one of the best 88 key MIDI controllers ever made. Best feeling in the action I've ever seen. It feels like a piano, but it's not heavy. It's still quick to react. Moog Polymoog. This is what made the song Cars by Gary Newman famous. It was also used for the bass in Visage Fade to Gray. Now here's Roland JX-3P, single oscillator, very capable synthesizer. Then we have the first rack of stuff. This up here, MIDI junction controller Yamaha used to make, which is basically a fancy switcher in the Korg version, and some Akai MIDI boxes. And these are cool in that the 35T, you can input an audio signal and it'll output MIDI, but not like pitch to MIDI, it'll output MIDI note data. So you could be playing drums, and every time you hit the drum it plays a note on a keyboard, and so on. The 20A is an arpeggiator. The ME15F is MIDI dynamics. Essentially that is just volume, MIDI volume. It's not audio volume. All these 10Ds are MIDI delays. They don't delay the audio, they delay the MIDI note. So if you play a note into it, you can adjust how long it takes for the note to come back out of it. The reason I have so many is that you can connect them to different keyboards, and then you play a riff on your master keyboard and it will echo through all the other keyboards, which can make for some interesting effects live. These, of course, 500, let's see, I think there's 640 channels of MIDI here. If I ever want to do a full MIDI, DAW recording where you're not actually recording the audio with the DAW, and other uses, of course. EMU Procussion, Proteus 1, 2, and 3. They're all expanded memory versions, the XRs. Kawai K4R. Expressionist box is an 8-in, it's an 8x8 CV to MIDI and back converter, which is great for hooking old keyboards to new. Kawai K1R, several D110s, and the K3M module version of the Kawai K3. Up here, the Kitten by Octave. That's a single oscillator mono synth. Over here is the big brother to it, the Cat, and these were recently featured in an episode of Synth Wizards, which you can find on YouTube. This is a Waldorf KB37 with a Behringer D in it, essentially making this a complete Behringer, or a complete Moog Model D clone without any Moog involvement, except of course Moog designed, the original Model D. And did the same thing here with the Behringer Neutron, which makes this a really fun little mono synth. The Neutron's an amazing little module. And down here, of course, is the big mama, the Yamaha CS-80, all 225 pounds of it. That's a great keyboard for everything. Polyphonic aftertouch, 8 voice. You know, it's just a legend. This here, a lot of people ask me about this. That's a cat stick. That's essentially a controller that controls both the kitten and the cat. And down here, CS30L. This was Yamaha's top of the line flagship monosynth of the day. That's an amazing unit. 3 oscillators, just routing and patching capability, literally through knob turning and switches that can almost rival modular. You can really do some stuff with that. And then, of course, on the other end of the scale is Yamaha's bottom of the line monosynth, but don't let that fool you. This little CS01 can really pump out some amazing sound. It looks like a toy, but it sure don't sound like it. And here's our audio rack. 64 channel Dante digital audio down here as needed. Of course, some scopes for waveforms and so on. Spectrum analyzer. 48 input line mixer. Effects units. The Antares Tascam mic unit. A must-have if you use a microphone for anything. And the legendary Lexicon PCM80 reverb and effects unit. That's old, but it just rivals everything today. That's a great reverb. Teisco tape delay. That's an 8-head unit, which is kind of scarce to find that many heads in one. Of course, the Lisa's D4. And back to the synthesizers. This is a Teisco branded SX210. Teisco and Kawai are one and the same. And then the Teisco branded SX240. This one recently we acquired from Tom Holkenborg, also known as Junkie XL on YouTube. Bit 99, which is a Crumar keyboard similar to the SX240 and the Akai AX-80s in sound. Bit 99 is a bit more programmable than the SX240. It sounds awesome if you're willing to program it, because it's kind of like the Matrix 6 Oberheim, where you have to enter buttons, enter numbers. So the solution to that is the Bit 99 controller. It solves that, easy to program. We have, of course, an SX240 controller for that. Then we have the rare white version of the Bit 99. Now here's the Behringer Monopoly, which was surprisingly well made. I was really impressed with the build quality of this. It's all metal. It has some good weight to it. It stays put. It sounds good. They've really upped their game over there at Behringer. That's a good keyboard right there. Novation Peak, still to this day, been out for a few years. Still made, still extremely desirable. Awesome keyboards. Well, that's a desktop version, but that's an awesome synth right there. Our original Yamaha RX-5, purchased new in 1985 when they came out. Complemented with the Roland TR-8S, which I replaced our Digitact with. The Digitact is great, but its logic, its workflow is so different from everything else here that it became kind of a hindrance, you know, because you're sitting there thinking about it rather than making music. This was well suited for us here. Very much live control over it too. And of course, what studio was complete without a Lindrum? Quintessential 80s. And we use a Polyend SEQ sequencer. I mainly use it to program more complex beats on the Lindrum. Even though you can do songs and patterns on the Lindrum with much longer chains, it's easier this way. And of course, Bass Station 2 is needed. The beauty of this compared to the Roland what is that, the TB3 or TR3, is that this transposes. When you play notes, the MIDI out, if it was connected to something else, like another sequencer, like in the MatrixBrute, playing a bass line or something, it will transpose that for you. So another great live use unit. Little Boss DR3 for when you want to just do some quick composition, just want quick drums. Just hit a button, let her rip. MatrixBrute, which is really cool. This was such a good keyboard. It really surprised me when I got it, and it became the master keyboard that drives everything else in here. You can really do a lot with that, and that was just a simple sequence there. Polybrute, another amazing polyphonic keyboard from Arturia. Aftertouch. It's got the slide strip like the CS-80. A lot of people don't know that's there because it matches the wood grain. Roland Jupiter 8. Say no more. We all know about those. One of the most awesome keyboards of the early 80s right there. This one has all the JL Cooper mods, which includes 3-bank patch memory, enhanced DCB output on the back, which I've got connected to a Kenton MIDI box, which gives this keyboard MIDI capability, you know, in and out, through, all of that. And I've snuck up under here in it are the switch for the banks of memory, plus these knobs and switches, which give you full control over the split, layer, and dual modes as far as the audio output, the volume. So you can send one out through a reverb and another one out through a delay. You know, it splits it up nicely. Here's the Novation Summit. This keyboard is essentially two Novation Peaks in one box with keys. Gives you 16-note polyphony, and of course the split, dual, layering, and all of that. That just takes the Peak to a whole nother level. Truly amazing. Moving on, this SX240 is Kawai branded. That's the first synthesizer I ever purchased right there. Bought brand new in 1984. That's what you were hearing playing the organ sounds earlier. It has a built-in sequencer, which we typically sequence those pads and organ riffs in when we play live. Kind of eliminates the need for an organist. But, you know, say no more, the SX240 is a real sleeper keyboard that's just now being discovered. It's a keyboard that, in a lot of people's opinions, can outpace the Junos. But that's a matter of opinion because they all have their pluses and minuses, of course. Now here is the Ensoniq Fismo. This was their first transwave synth, and it's an amazing sound comes out of that. And here's, I have to back up, the big mama, the Sequential Circuits Prophet 10. That's basically two Prophet 5s in one box with all the usual split, dual, layering, the addition of the sequencer here, the sequential poly sequencer, and the usual array of familiarity with the knobs. However, it's doubled up, you know, for your dual manuals. And that's another awesome thing. It may be big, but those dual manuals are incredibly handy when you're playing. Remarkable keyboard for the times. These were fun because they had a tape backup built right into them to back up your sequences and sounds right there. Oberheim expander, basically an Oberheim Matrix 12 without keys. This one has the unusual glossy front panel, so I'm trying to get the light up there out of the reflection. Truly amazing also. You saw the Quasimidi and everything over here. Now back here, hiding is a Jupiter 8 or Jupiter 6 that I am repairing for a good friend, or trying to repair. It's got a weird, quirky problem with the Europa mod that was added to it. We're trying to sort that out so it'll boot up. This Kawai K5 here was the second synthesizer I ever purchased. It's just waiting to find a stand in here. This is an Irijule Theoryboard. That is a lot of fun too. You connect it out through MIDI. You can set 2 different MIDI channels up for the left and the right pads of buttons. And you could set it up for chords and progressions and soloing on the right. So you can literally play songs and chords and things and never hit a bad note. It's really a nifty little tool for doing live use. I've often thought about putting guitar nubs on the ends so you can play it like a guitar. Roland JX-3P. Yamaha little fun drum deal, you know, consumer grade. There's Yamaha's flagship sequencer, the QX1, back from early 80s. And I have a second one over here. I've converted both of these with a memory card. Well, that one has a USB stick drive. This one has a memory card drive. We're replacing the floppy drive. And that one also has an OLED screen, so that's very usable when you want to record songs that have a lot of changes, like a symphony orchestra song. You can play that until it runs out of memory and not have to worry about step sequencing or repeating. Revox A77 half-track master open reel deck. That one runs at 15 inches per second. Casio VL tones, gotta have them. Korg CX3 organ, which has some amazing organ sounds and a Leslie effect that is spot on, right down to its simulation of the Leslie speeding up and slowing down. This little Roland box here, a lot of people aren't familiar with. That's their old DCB box. Remember earlier I mentioned that the Jupiter 8 I have hooked up to a Kenton box that gives it MIDI from the DCB port. Well, this was Roland's original way of doing just that. You connect your DCB to it and the keyboard, and then your MIDI channel switches are right back here. It was a bit simpler than the Kenton that this I think only just gave you notes. I don't think it did much more. And this whole area here that I'm standing in is kind of the slush area where we would set up a guitar or drum set or whatever is needed. Acoustic piano back there and other things. And then, of course, the computer here, which does all the production, recording, and all of that. No need to explain there. We're all familiar with that. It's a Mac Pro, dual Westmere processors, 12 cores, 128 gigs of RAM, and 64 channels of Dante currently, with capability of doing 128. Oh, there you have it for the main keyboard room here.